President Trump is not backing down from critics who say his Twitter attacks on a group of progressive Democratic lawmakers are racist. The president tweeted yesterday they should, quote, go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came. Mr. Trump tweeted again this morning saying, quote, when will the radical left congresswomen apologize to our country?
Yes, Donald Trump is racist. This isn't news. Those defending Trump's racist statements are either doing it because they feel embarrassed, but not enough to denounce him, or because they agree with him. And those minimizing his obvious statements, like this New York Times journalist, is doing everyone, and most importantly, the truth, a disservice. So today, that's what I'm going to be talking about. But before, let me just explain this. I'm a Turkish-American dual citizen. I criticize both countries fairly regularly and get told to go back to my whole country all the time, so I know exactly what Trump means when he tells these 4 women of color to go back and help fix the totally broken, crime-infested places from which they came. Well, first off, they were all born here except for Ilhan Omar, and second, the implication is that if you're black or brown, you're a second-class citizen and you don't get to criticize this country. And you definitely don't get to criticize this country if you're an immigrant. Just think about how disgusting that is for a second, especially since Trump became president by all over this country. Now, the New York Times published an analysis piece titled, Trump Fans the Flames of Racial Fire, and I've never read an article like this before where the writer lays out all this evidence but refuses to outright say the conclusion, so I'm just gonna read a passage from it because it perfectly describes all the racist things that Trump has done. Mr. Trump propelled his way to the White House in part by promoting the false birther conspiracy theory that Mr. Obama was actually born in Africa and not Hawaii. He opened his presidential bid in 2015 with an attack on Mexican rapists coming across the border, although some, I assume, are good people, and later called for a ban on all Muslims entering the United States. He said that an American-born judge of Mexican heritage could not be fair to him because of his ethnic background. As president, he complained during meetings that became public that Haitian immigrants all have AIDS. He said African visitors would never go back to their huts. He disparaged Haiti and some African nations with a vulgarity and said instead of immigrants from there, the United States should accept more immigrants from Norway. He said there were very fine people on both sides of a rally where a neo-Nazi killed a counter-protester, although he also condemned the neo-Nazis there, but he said their sympathizers were still good though. I love that after all of this, the New York Times article still ends with, Trump is only saying what others believe, but are too afraid to say he insists. And each time the flames roar and Mr. Trump tosses a little more accelerant on top, the fire may be hot, but that's the way he likes it. I'm gonna come out and say this. We really have to stop taking the word of individuals on whether or not they're racist and look at their actions instead, okay? My man is using Gestapo-style nationwide raids to scare the out of immigrants and signal to the most radical elements in his base that he's taking care of the problem. Racist people will never admit that they're racist. Bullies won't admit that they're bullies. We don't do anything like this in real life anyway. Like, imagine if this is how we solved crimes. Like, well, sir, we found the victim's decapitated head in his freezer. He was holding a bloody knife in his hand when we stormed the house, but gosh darn it, he keeps saying he didn't do it. Oh well, I guess we have to keep looking. Asking a racist to admit to racism is a dangerously high standard to set, and it lets people get away with a lot of violent rhetoric that ends up causing material harm to people of color. For example, Jared Taylor is an avowed white supremacist. When asked if he's racist, he brushes it off and says, no, I'm a race realist. My point is, waiting for someone to say the N-word or literally hang a person of color before we acknowledge that this person is racist is dumb as shit. Because you let racists set up a foundation to normalize that kind of behavior, and then legislative actions follow naturally. This has always happened throughout history. Also, speaking of history, white supremacy doesn't pose a threat to the established order. That's why the Nazis were able to peacefully demonstrate in the streets while communists were being targeted during the McCarthy trials. That's why COINTELPRO allowed intelligence agencies to work with far-right and white supremacist groups to subvert the operations of black liberation groups, the Communist Party, and other anti-war efforts. During the nation's many political battles over the legacy of racism, politicians have often found different ways to signal to a racially agitated white base that they will maintain existing racial hierarchies. If you don't believe me, just ask Ronald Reagan's strategist Lee Atwater admitting to the famous Southern strategy, which the Republican Party apologized for later.
You start out in 1954 by saying by 1968 you can't say that hurts you, backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, And all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than white.
Call out Trump, call out his defenders, but most importantly, fight against racist action. Once again, what's legal is immaterial. What matters is doing what is right. I'm Hasan Piker, and this has been The Breakdown. Did you know that TYT Network is now available on YouTube's new streaming platform, YouTube TV? Get access to full TYT episodes and exclusive shows by signing up for YouTube TV today. All new subscribers get a 7-day free trial, so head on over to youtube.tv and search for the TYT Network channel.